Good afternoon and welcome back, ladies, gents and Pikachus, to another analysis and breakdown of the Quran of the Muslims. So earlier on today, this morning, we went through verses 22 to 26 of the Quran of the Muslims, and we found that it was just absolutely disgusting and deplorable. So what we're going to go through now is the English version, so we can figure out what is the difference between this book here, the Arabic Quran, the word of Allah, and this one here, the English, not the word of Allah, trickery-based false Quran. So before I start, I'm going to tell you now, if you have any doubts as to my factual accuracy, please buy these and convert this one into English. Then you can compare them both yourself directly. And after having done so, you'll recognise that every single word I'm about to tell you now is 100% true and accurate of the word of Allah, the divinely inspired word of the creator of the universe, if you believe that, which I do not. And then once you've done that, you'll figure out that everything that I've said in all of my videos is actually true. Regardless of the fact that like 90% of Muslims go, he's an evil Jew, he's an evil Zionist, he's lying, he must be lying. No, he is not an evil Zionist, he's not lying. He's just fairly criticising a sick, disgusting religion, which is a cult. So with that in mind, let's carry on where we left off this morning. So, the first line, 22, was, do not have sex with your father's wife nor slaves, unless of course he gives you permission, because if he doesn't give you permission and you do this, it's hateful, sinful and living indecently for her. You know, the blame's all on her kind of thing. So that's what it said inside this one. That's Allah's word. So let's compare that to what Muslims think. This is Muslims' word. This is what Muslims wrote for us Westerners to read instead of that one, because they know most of us aren't going to be reading in Arabic. 22. And marry not women who your fathers married in the past, except what is already occurred, and it is shameful and odious, an abominable custom indeed. Oh, isn't that weird? So they don't mention any sex, they don't mention anything about your father giving permission for you to do this, and then it being okay. And I think what's happened there, like we saw, they've cut lots of the words out and then stuck the Frankenstein sentence back together to try and make a new sentence, and then jumbled around the grammar a little bit. So what we have here is not exactly the opposite of what we have over here, but it is certainly not the same. What we have here is, and marry not women who your fathers married, which is not the same thing as saying don't have sex with the people your fathers had sex with. It also doesn't say the thing about slaves, how your dad can give you one of his sex slaves as a wife if you can't find a good woman. That's what this one said. And then it finally says, accept what is past. So here it's making out when it says accept what is past. If you've already married these women, it's still shameful and disgusting for you, O Muslim, but it will be forgiven. Whereas we know that isn't how it goes in the actual word of Allah. And then in the end of this, they've added a completely new bit here, which isn't in that bit. An abominable custom indeed. It's not a custom, what is said here. The thing about marrying is that would be a custom, but as we know, that is not what Allah said in here. The custom is sex between sex slaves and your dad giving you or selling you one of his sex slaves because you couldn't find a wife. So this is completely different. And the thing about it being an abominable custom indeed, abominable means one thing in the Holy Bible. That's why they've used it. They've been reading the Holy Bible. Abominable, or the abomination, means something so disgusting that it makes you go, brother, that kind of thing, right? And there's only one thing that's called abominable in the Holy Bible, and that is sodomizing another man. So, are we saying here, O Muslims, marrying a woman who your father did marry, so your stepmom, for instance, if you want to marry your own stepmom, that's what you're saying now is abominable and an abomination. But it's a custom anyway, so that means you have been doing it lots and lots and lots in the past, and now you're trying to turn your back on it. So in the wording of this, O Muslim scholars who have written this, you've actually given away that you did in fact invent this line. An odious and abominable custom, indeed. What is a custom, Muslims? Is a custom something that we've been doing forever? Or is that a law? No, a custom is a localized, newer version of a law that we only started doing recently when we had new information available to us. And that is why you have called it in your own book a custom, because the actual law The word of Allah is not the same as the custom. Thusly we know, henceforth we know, these are completely different. They're not exactly the same this time, but they are completely different. That's what that means. So, and we move on to the next one. 23 said, forbidden also are for having sex with your mother, daughters, sisters, your mother's wife, the sisters of your children, or stepdaughters of your wives. Unless they are no longer in marriages. So if they get divorced from their current marriages in order to sleep with you and then become one of your wives, then that's okay. There shall be no fault in it, since it's considered that those things are past, i.e. they're not considered to be the sisters of your children anymore. They're not considered to be the stepdaughters of your wife anymore, because you've got rid of your wife, so you're no longer related. So what Allah's decree is telling us here, and why he's saying he's oft forgiving, if you take a liking to your sister's child, then you, but she's only your sister through marriage, then you can kick out the wife that makes you related to her and get the daughter of the sister in, because it's past. Allah says it's no longer considered that she's your sister anymore. That means it's not her child anymore. That means it's fair game. So it's politicking. Allah is promoting politicking in sex and marriage by saying you can organise for your sister's child or your sister's stepchild to be available to you for sex and marriage by kicking out one of your current wives. That's fine. And then he says at the end, Allah decrees it, for he is oft forgiving. So he's saying even if in the past it would have been sinful, now it's forgiven. So, is this what we're going to find in the English Quran? Let's have a look. Oh, it's a very long one. Wow, this is much. I can tell you now, this is like 3 times longer in English than it ever was in Arabic. So this is going to be a juicy one, I feel. They put a lot of extra work into this to try and cover up the sins of their brothers. So let's find out. Prohibited to you for marriage, in brackets, because obviously they added that part and took away the sex part. Prohibited to you in marriage are your mother's daughters, sisters, father's sisters, mother's sisters, brother's daughters, sisters' daughters, foster mothers who gave you suck, foster sisters, stepdaughters, stepdaughters' wives' mothers under guardianship, born of your wives to whom you have not gone into, but no prohibition if you have not gone into. I don't even know what that means. We're going to have to analyse that one. Wives of your sons proceeding from your loins. Oh, that is so disgusting. And 2 sisters in wedlock at one time and the same time, except for what is past. For Allah is oft forgiving and oft merciful. So, I think what we have here, the reason this is a lot longer, is the bits that are in brackets is to kind of lead you down the wrong path, isn't it? That's why they've added those bits. So it says, prohibited to you, brackets, from marriage, and they've overwritten from sex, because in that one, in Allah's word, it doesn't say marriage, it says sex. Prohibited from only marriage, but not from sex then, I suppose, are your mothers. Like, you have to... I still can't believe Allah needs to tell Muslims, don't marry your mothers. Like, what is wrong with these guys? What is... Anyway, don't marry your mothers. Don't marry your daughters. Don't marry your sisters. Not even your father's or your daughter's sisters. Don't marry your foster mothers who gave you suck. So that means if you were suckled by someone when you were younger and now you've grown up, don't marry her. Why would you ever do that, Muslims? Why would you even think that was okay in the first place? Oh, that's right, because in here, they're not described. Only in this one. So they have to correct you in this one. Thusly we know, these are different. This one doesn't say it at all. This one has it in brackets and says don't do it. Your wives' mothers. Don't marry your wives' mothers. So if you have a woman as a wife, don't also have that woman's mother as a wife. These guys are just miscreants. Like, brother, come on. Come on, Muslims. Seriously. Why do you need a... I'll carry on. Where was I? Under your wives' mothers, your stepdaughters born under your guardianship. So your stepdaughters who live with you, you can't sleep with them. But if they don't live with you, you can, because they're no longer under your guardianship. That's the bit in brackets that they've added. Because as we know in here, it says you can sleep with your stepdaughters as long as you kick out the mother. So if you divorce the mother, you can have the stepdaughter. It's fine. Allah will forgive you, is what it said. And the sin will be on her, not you, is what Allah said. And then finally, you can't have those who have been wives of your sons proceeding from your loins. So if your wives have had a wife in the past, and it says in brackets from your loins, so one of your own sons, not an orphan son or someone else's son, if your son has married someone, you can't. Even though we know Muhammad himself married the wives of his sons. So this is the one where you find Muhammad marrying the wives of his sons, and then Allah saying this is what to do, and by the way, Muhammad's a perfect man, you should all be like him. But all of a sudden, now we're finding out, no, you can't do that. We're not going to hear about how Muhammad himself did that. And it even says, these are prohibitions by Allah. So it's the opposite of what that one says. This is the opposite of what that one says. And then he rounds out the verse by saying, 2 sisters in wedlock at one and the same time. So you can't marry 2 sisters at once. You can marry one, have children by her, kick her out, then marry the other one. Even though in this one it says no, if you do it at the same time and then you read this passage, it's fine, you'll be forgiven. As long as you didn't read this passage before you married them. So obviously you can politic and you can change that and you can organise that, as we know is allowed in here. And we know what these Muslims are like. They're just going to tweak the rules to sort themselves out and suit whatever little whims and perversions they enjoy. Then they're going to read this and go, oh, I didn't know. That's exactly what they would do. And this is promoting that. They're doing that because this says so. And then the last thing is, except for what is past, for Allah is oft forgiving and most merciful. Now they've added most merciful there, I feel. And the reason they've added the most merciful bit is because it says except for what is past. So technically, if you chop the heads off one of your wives for some reason, she's past. So you didn't have to divorce her and get into sin. She did the sin. You cut her head off because it was how you punish her, or you locked her in a house and she's starved. That's the other punishment Allah says is okay to put upon your women. And then after that, you can marry her sister. It's totally legit. And that's the end of verse 23 in the English Quran. 24. Only married women who are slaves in your right hand are considered chaste for you, to prevent you from fornication. So what this means is, to prevent you from touching yourself so often, O Muslims, only women who are married to other slaves are considered chaste. So you can't have the wives of Muslims, you can only have the wives of infidels. Now we know why Muslims have such an obsession with white girls. Because they are not allowed to cheat on their wives with other Muslims, but it's absolutely fine for them to cheat on their wives with infidels, despite the fact that they are also married. It doesn't matter. It doesn't count as a marriage in the eyes of Allah. And that's what we know from verse 24 of the Quran of the Muslims in the actual word of Allah. Then he finishes up by saying, you can pay for them, for their bodily pleasures. In doing so is no sin upon you, because it's Allah's wisdom and he allows it. That's what Allah said in his book. But what is he going to say in English? Well, let's find out. Prohibited are women who are already married, except those who your right hand possesses. Thus hath Allah ordained against you. Now, as we know, what this book describes as being in your right hand is not slaves. So it's completely wrong, because in that book we know in your right hand means an orphan you took off the street, a slave you took from pillaging, or a prisoner of war that you made into a slave. That's what your right hand possesses. In this book, the only thing your right hand possesses are your existing wives or women who come to you, just coincidentally, like you didn't go to war and take them, and they were orphans on the street, they had nothing, you gave them a home. So it's nicer in here. But I think what we can tell is, whether you're doing it through a nice means, or whether you're doing it through the means of war and slavery and oppression, being in your right hand is slavery. Let's not beat around the bush here. If you excuse my pun, didn't intend it. This book thinks it's okay because they want it. That book thinks it's okay because Allah said it's okay. But on both of these occasions, in both books, verse 24 is talking about forced labour sex slaves. Let's not get that wrong. Then he goes on. Thus hath Allah ordained prohibitions against you, except for these. All others are lawful. So there's no age limit. with gifts from your property, desiring chastity, not fornication. Give them their dowry. Oh, it's spelt wrong. Give them their dowry for the enjoyment you have of them as a duty, which means you pay them every time you have sex with them. Even though they've tried to dress it up as a duty, like when you're at the airport and you go duty free, and you don't pay any tax. This is prostitution he's talking about. Even though he's trying to avoid calling it prostitution in here, which he didn't do in that one, by the way, it is prostitution. Give them their dowry. No, a dowry is a one-off payment, Allah. Not every time you have sex with someone payment. There is no blame on you if you eventually do agree, and you vary it, for Allah is all-knowing and all-wise. So there we go. In the end of the verse, he says, there's no blame on you, Muslim, as long as you can get this poor sex slave woman to agree with you by paying her, then it's varied by mutual agreement of you both. And in terms of this, Allah won't blame that on you because he's all-knowing and wise. He knew that was going to happen. He knew it was for the best. He knew she was going to eventually agree, and that's good. And that's why you can carry on having sex with your sister's daughter, despite the fact that you've had her head cut off or you've thrown her out of the house. Because you're paying the daughter now, so it's fine. These guys really are little sick little monkeys, aren't they? So anyway, we move on. Verse 25. If you cannot take a wife of a believing woman, then make a believer and wife of your slave woman, who Allah did put in your right hand. If he gives permission, you can buy a slave from another and make them believe only in Allah, and pay them a wage that is fair to prevent your fornication. If they should refuse, you can only torment them as half of you could if they were your wife. Because obviously if you torment them fully, A, they will die, and B, you will have no chance of marrying them in future. Allah is forgiving. He has ordained this will make you more patient and good as a man. That's what verse 25 in Allah's actual words said. But what are we going to find when we compare this to the word of the Muslim? 25. If any of you have not the means wherewith to wed, therefore to wed free believing women. So now he's making it about money. If you can't afford to pay a big dowry for a nice, good, unmarried Muslim woman, then you may wed believing girls from those amongst your right-hand possession. So he's saying, A, all the girls in your right-hand possession are not going to be believers. Even though in the last one, he said the girls in your right hand are all going to be there voluntarily. But I would say, if you have slaves who are voluntary in your household, how come they're not Muslim? Just a thought. But anyway, we'll carry on. If any of you have not the means wherewith to wed free believing girls, ones that choose to be Islamic, then you may wed believing girls from amongst those whom your right hand possesses. So he's admitting here, you have forced these girls to become Islamic. You have taken them as sex slaves, even though the previous verse denied it, and you forced them into being believers, because the other married women were considered to be free believing. Now these ones are only considered to be believing, so they're not freely believing. They're being forced into surrender with violence to believe in your crappy cult. And then you're going to marry them, are you? Very wise, Allah. Very, very wise and merciful. This is just what I would expect from you. I know I'm looking at my Bible, my lovely Bible, which is the opposite of all this nonsense and has only good stuff in. So we carry on. Ye are one from another. What that means is, don't worry about incest. You're one from another anyway. You're all related anyway. It's all much of a muchness. Don't worry about that. You are one from another. Wed them with the leave of their owners. See, this is the bit about your friends can give you slaves to marry if they feel sorry for you. And the slave has absolutely no chance or no choice in the matter. They have to do what you tell them. Otherwise, you can beat them, and you can lock them in the house and starve them to death, which is what you'll probably do if they say no, because they would have insulted your honour, because obviously Muslims are such an honourable lot now that we've read this, and we know that this is the one they're actually reading or basing it on. They don't even realise they're infidels when they're adapting this. But anyway, they're honourable in the eyes of Allah. Allah's oft forgiving. According to what is reasonable. They should be chaste, not fornicators, not taking adulterous relationships when they are taken in wedlock. If they commit indecency, their punishment is half that of a free woman. This permission is for those among you to fear sin, whereas that one says it's for you both to fear Allah. So isn't that interesting? Allah says this is so you can fear Allah, so it's like good, moral. This one is saying this is so you can fear sin, which is Satan. So they're conflating in this one Allah, in this one Satan, being the same thing that you are fearing. Which I think is really weird, because you won't find in the Holy Bible anyone ever thinking that Christ and Satan could be interchangeably used. They're opposites. But Allah and Satan in this particular line are the same being. So we carry on. Half of the... oh, shut up, motorbike arsehole. We'll wait for him to go past. So anyway, if they commit indecency, their punishment is half of that of our free women. And it is better for those who fear sin, but it is better for those who practice self-restraint. That's completely not in Allah's word. So in here, what you're told is you can beat the woman with a stick as thick as your thumb, or you can lock her in the house and starve her to death if she deserves it, or if she's a slave, you can do half of that. So you can lock her in there for half of her life rather than until she dies. But what is better is that you practice self-restraint, so that you don't actually do that. And Allah will be oft forgiving and most merciful of you if you show the self-restraint. So that's a completely new added bit. That wasn't in there at all. There's no self-restraint. This entire book does not have the word self, restraint or self-restraint throughout this entire book. It just isn't in there. But they saw fit to add it in this one for us Westerners, because they know the infidels going to be criticising, and they can't be having any criticism because they have no faith. If we criticise them, they'll cry. Brother, they'll do that to each other. So that's the end of 25. And we get to the last verse, number 26. Allah doth wish to make clear to you, and to guide you in the ways of those before you. He doth wish to turn you in all to mercy, and Allah is all-knowing and all-wise. Actually, that was 26. So, anyway, let's go through 26 in our Allah notes from this book. So, keep in mind, that was all about turning you to mercy and niceness, and, it wasn't anything to do with punishment. Allah is all-knowing, and guides you to the traditions of your fathers, and will relent upon you in these ways, for it is by his wisdom that you relent. So what this is talking about is the previous bit about how you only punish your slaves with half the torment you punish your women with. Now notice that is a very long... This is the longest verse. It's like that there. The longest verse in this whole page is the bit about tormenting the woman in order that you can convince them to willingly be your wife, despite the fact that it was your father's wife or your father's slave who he was having sex with, or it was your sister's daughter, or it was someone who was related to you. That's the impression that we got, is the ones who are forbidden, mothers, daughters, sisters, wives, mothers, sisters, children, stepdaughters of wives, unless they are no longer in their marriages. That's what we're talking about here. Even though he starts off saying these are the prohibited ones you can't marry, then he says unless they are no longer in marriages, and that is what this is talking about. So unless this happens first, those people are prohibited. But if this happens, those people are no longer prohibited. That is why Allah is saying, Allah is all-knowing and guides you into the traditions of thy fathers. Like having his wives and such. Because he will relent on you, even though this is considered to be sinful, and pass the sin on to the woman. And this is his ways and his wisdom and his mercy towards you, O Muslim. That's what that meant. So when we move over here, it's almost the complete opposite. Allah doth wish to make clear to you and guide you in the ways of those before you. So he's saying your ancestors, not your father. Your ancestors, i.e. someone who's not directly related to you, who's not directly related to your mother or your father, or who your father has had sex with. Allah doth wish to turn to you, but those who follow their lusts... Oh, I've started reading the next one. He doth wish for you to turn in your mercy, and Allah is all-knowing, all-wise. Notice there's no all-mercies in this one now, because they've taken out the bit that would require mercy and bracketed and replaced it with a new bit. And that is the end of our reading of the page of Quran we went through this morning. So I just wanted you to be absolutely certain when Muslims are appearing in my comments and going, he's a dirty shill. No, he's not a dirty shill. He's read you not only the Allah word version of the Quran in Arabic, which I remind you is the Arabic Quran. This is the one that is Allah's word. This is the only one which is Allah's word, because he only speaks Arabic. So this is the one we went through this morning. And now we have also gone through Quran.com, the English translation, romanticised fake doctrine version as well. Come at me, bros. So that's the end of this video. I hope you learned something. You weren't too disgusted by it. I certainly was. And you enjoyed that. God bless. And I'll see you in the next one. Bye now. And there you have it. How to sleep with your father's wives or ex-sex slaves, or your sister's daughters, or your aunt, or anyone else who is related to you. Just follow the rules and Allah will provide. So that's the end of this video and the end for today. God bless you all, and I'll see you in the next one. Bye.